My daughter-in-law walked in, dropped her bag on the table with a thud, and said, "We should just redo the whole place. The house needs to fit our life now." I didn't argue. I didn't push back. I just stayed quiet and started changing everything from the locks on the doors all the way to her place in this home. I think we need to completely redo the dining room. Vivian, the dark oak feels so heavy and old-fashioned, don't you think? My daughter-in-law, Brooke, set her fancy designer bag down hard on my big oak table without even looking at me. I stood by the window of my place in Seattle's Queen Anne neighborhood, watching the soft gray rain mist over the hills and the distant sound of ferries on the water. Since my husband Richard passed 2 years ago, the house had gone quiet. It was a good kind of quiet, the kind I'd earned after 34 years working night shifts as a nurse. But for the last 3 months, that quiet had been getting talked over nonstop. That oak is solid American oak, Brooke. Richard and I saved for years to get it. "It stays right where it is," I said, calmly, not turning around. "I'm 67, and after all those years in the hospital, I know one thing for sure: you clean a wound before it gets infected." Brooke let out a short, dry laugh that sounded almost sorry for me. "We live here now, Vivian. We're a young family with plans. We need to feel comfortable if we're going to support Ethan's career." My son Ethan hovered in the kitchen doorway, staring at his phone, shoulders hunched like he was trying to disappear. He'd always been putty in the hands of women who knew exactly what they wanted. First me, now her. They'd talked me into letting them move in after their rental got yanked for owner move-in, and Ethan's tech company went through another restructuring. I'd pictured grandkids, Sunday dinners, a house full of life again. Brooke had pictured a takeover. I picked up my coffee mug from the counter. The coffee had gone stone cold, just like the air in the room. I poured the rest down the sink, slow, watching the brown liquid swirl away. "I'm heading out for a walk," I said. Brooke didn't answer. She was already tapping away on her tablet, probably planning what to haul to the curb. It was time to set the temperature in my own house. If they wanted a fight, they were about to learn that my calm was stronger than their noise. The next morning, the kitchen was already taken over before my alarm even went off. That was new. Usually, those two slept till 9, while I enjoyed my first cup of tea in peace. When I walked in, it looked like a tornado had hit, at least by my standards. Brooke had boxed up all my neatly organized spice jars and replaced them with her bright-colored organic boxes and smoothie powders. "A place for everything, Vivian," she said, grinding the expensive espresso beans I'd picked up last week like they were hers. I didn't fight her. I didn't even bring up the spices. Instead, I opened the fridge and saw my Greek yogurt shoved all the way to the back to make room for her oat milk. I pulled out a little blue label maker from the drawer, an old habit from my nursing days. Slowly and deliberately, I printed my name, Vivian. I stuck the labels on my shelf in the fridge, on my coffee bag, and on the bread bin. "Ethan, we need to talk for a minute," I said, when my son wandered in, still half asleep in his boxers. He nodded vaguely, but Brooke jumped in for him right away. "Not now, Ethan has an important Zoom in a few minutes. We don't have time for feelings." I didn't block the coffee maker. I just stood there, calm and solid, impossible to ignore. "Starting tomorrow, we split the fixed bills 3 ways: Ethan, electric, water, heat, and internet." I looked at the last 3 years of statements. "Your usage is way higher. We'll keep separate household accounts. Everyone buys their own groceries." Brooke froze. The grinder went quiet. "But we're saving for the new lease car so Ethan can look professional for clients. We thought we were all supporting each other here." I looked her straight in the eye without blinking. "Support goes both ways, Brooke. You'll save faster if you stop eating my good cheese and drinking my coffee." I didn't give them room to argue. I grabbed my keys and left for an appointment I'd set 2 days earlier. When I got back that afternoon, the first lock had already been changed, but not by them. I'd called the locksmith while they were both out networking. My private study, the room with Richard's old leather armchair. His first additions, and the only photo of his father, was now fitted with a solid new deadbolt. It was my sanctuary. That evening, when Brooke tried to barge in carrying a pile of ironing, she'd decided on her own that it was now her laundry and storage room. She ran smack into the locked door. "Why is this locked? Vivian!" The keys stuck. She yelled down the long hallway of my old house. I sat in the living room in my favorite chair reading the paper. I didn't answer right away. Only when she stormed in red-faced did I slowly lower the newspaper to my lap. "The lock isn't stuck, Brooke. It's new. And I have the only key." Her face flushed deep red, the unmistakable sign of anger she couldn't control. "This is ridiculous, pure selfishness. We need the space for winter coats and Ethan's files. You barely use it." I adjusted my reading glasses. Selfishness, Brooke, is when someone rearranges a woman's furniture and memories without asking, especially when she's the one giving them a roof over their heads. "This room is mine. You have the guest room and the old kids' room. That's plenty." Ethan wandered in looking miserable. "Mom, does it have to be like this? We're family. It just feels hostile." He was trying to play peacemaker, but he was really just carrying her water. "Ethan," I said evenly, "the new utility breakdown is on the kitchen table. I expect your share in my account by Friday night. If it's not there, I'll cancel the internet at the end of the month. I don't need high speed for my crossword puzzles, but you do for work." Brooke opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. "I'd like to finish reading in peace now. Thanks." It was a small win, but the line was drawn. The room stayed locked, and the quiet inside it was mine. The days that followed felt icy cold, and it had nothing to do with Seattle weather. Brooke answered my clear boundaries with passive-aggressive silence. She cooked only for two, now loud and obvious. The smell of garlic and searing meat would drift down the hall, but the second I stepped into the kitchen, conversation died. I'd seen this pattern for decades in the hospital families tearing each other apart at the bedside because they couldn't admit their own greed. I didn't get mad. I got structured. When Friday came and no money had hit my account, I followed through. I changed the Wi-Fi password and turned off guest access. When Ethan burst into the living room that evening in a near panic because he needed to upload an important file, I stayed calm, needles clicking in my knitting. "The internet's not working." "Mom, did you do something?" I looked up from my yarn. "The account's in my name, Ethan. Since you didn't pay your share, I limited access on outside devices to save bandwidth. I figured you wanted to spend less time on the computer anyway." Brooke stood behind him, eyes narrowed to slits. "This is nasty, childish games. You're hurting Ethan's livelihood," she almost screamed. It was the first time she'd really lost it. I set my knitting down. "No, Brooke. This is just running a household. If you use a service, you pay for it. That's how the real world works, and it works the same in my house. Once the money's in the account, Ethan gets the new password. I won't be giving it to you, you're not contributing." Right then, it hit me they had never seen me as a mother or mother-in-law. To them, I was just an inconvenient tenant in my own home, a landlord with property they could slowly push into the background. Brooke wanted control of the space, the money, and eventually my inheritance. But she'd forgotten that I'd learned to stay steady in crises while everyone else lost their heads. I went to the kitchen, made myself a simple sandwich, and savored the angry silence that followed me. That next Monday, I started a full inventory, open and obvious, so no one could miss it. I took out my good china, my grandmother's silverware, and the crystal glasses, laying everything across the big oak table in the dining room. Ethan watched nervously from the corner of his eye while he fixed his own bowl of cereal. His own cereal, I noted with quiet satisfaction. "What are you doing, Mom?" "Selling it," he asked. Half worried, half curious. "I'm getting organized." "Ethan, at my age, you should know exactly what you have and who deserves it or doesn't," I said, polishing a silver spoon with a soft cloth. Brooke, who had taken up vacuuming the hall lately to show she owned the cleanliness, stopped and came in. She stared at the pieces. I saw the dollar signs flash in her eyes. She wasn't seeing the stories behind them. She was seeing resale value on eBay or at some antique shop. "We could probably paint the sideboard," she said suddenly, like nothing had happened. "A light gray would open the room up. And these old glasses just take up space. We could move them to the basement and make room for modern wine glasses." I held the spoon up to the light and watched my warped reflection. "This sideboard isn't getting painted, Brooke. And the glasses stay. If you want modern ones, put them in your room." She snorted. "You're clinging to dead things. We're the ones who are alive." I looked her dead in the eye. "That's exactly why I'm planning ahead. An inheritance, Brooke, is something you earn through respect and holding a family together. It's not an automatic payout for bad behavior. I met with my bank this morning to review my will and life estate rights. That was a little white lie. I'd only picked up my statements, but the effect was perfect." Brooke went pale. She'd probably assumed I'd already signed the house over to Ethan while I was still breathing. She had badly underestimated how independent I still was. I wasn't some fragile widow. I was a woman with a plan. The following Sunday was the first day since they'd moved in that I didn't even pretend we'd eat together. In the past, I'd grab fresh bagels, set the table, and wait for them to roll out of bed. Those days were over. I was up at 7, picked up one hearty whole-grain roll and a croissant from the bakery, brewed a small pot of Darjeeling, and carried it out to my little deck overlooking the quiet courtyard. It was cool, but the air felt clean and sharp. When Ethan and Brooke finally wandered into the kitchen around 10, they found nothing set out. Cabinets closed, coffee maker cold. I heard their muttering through the open door. "She didn't buy anything?" Ethan asked, sounding like a kid whose magic trick had stopped working. "Nothing," Brooke hissed. "She's acting like a dictator. We need to put our foot down, Ethan. This can't keep going. We're suffocating under her rules." I sipped my tea and smiled up at the gray Seattle sky. It was amazing how fast family support turned into oppression the moment they didn't get their way. Brooke stepped out onto the deck in her expensive silk robe she'd probably bought with the rent money she was saving. "Vivian, this is ridiculous. Are you seriously going to let us starve?" "We're family." I didn't even look at her. I watched a robin on the neighbor's roof instead. "Family shares the space and the load, Brooke. You're guests in this house who forgot how to act like guests. I'm not your housekeeper. If you want bagels, the bakery on the corner is open till 11. Brooke slammed the deck door so hard the glass rattled. Later, I heard them arguing in the bedroom. Ethan sounded desperate, caught in the middle, but I had no pity left. When you won't choose truth, you end up living in the lie someone else builds for you. To turn up the pressure, I invited an old friend over the next Tuesday, Frank, a retired real estate guy Richard used to play cards with. I asked him to wear his best suit and bring his leather portfolio. We sat in the living room with the windows open so every word carried to the deck and hallway. We talked loud and clear about current square foot prices in Queen Anne, the huge demand for updated older homes, and the idea of converting the place into condos. "You know, Frank," I said, stirring my tea noisily. "This house is big. Too big for me alone if the vibe isn't right. I'm thinking about selling outright and finding a nice low-maintenance senior community near the water with full services and no family friction." Frank nodded enthusiastically and took notes. "Smart move, Vivian. In this location, you'd get enough to live worry-free into your 90s. I caught Brooke hovering in the hall, pretending to dust head tilted to catch every word. The second Frank left, she burst in, eyes wide with panic. "Are you actually selling? Where would we go?" "We moved everything here. Ethan has his business address registered." She was on the edge of losing it. The safe little fantasy she'd built the house as guaranteed inheritance and free base was cracking apart. "That's the problem with making plans without the owner, Brooke," I said, calmly setting Frank's business card on the mantel like a trophy. "They fall apart. I'm just looking at my options the same way you've been looking at yours. You wanted efficiency. I want peace." She didn't say another word, but her jaw worked overtime. She finally understood she wasn't a rook in this chess game anymore, just a pawn. And that pawn was my son, downstairs, trying and failing to fix the washing machine he'd overloaded himself. 2 days later, Ethan cornered me in the hall as I was heading out for groceries. He looked wrecked, dark circles, wrinkled shirt. "Mom, can we please? Just talk normally. Brooke's at the end of her rope. She cries all the time. She says you've completely changed, that you've turned mean." He sounded like a little boy begging his parents to stop fighting. It gave me a quick pang, but I held firm. "Ethan," I said, looking him square in the eyes, "I haven't changed. I've just stopped making myself invisible. Brooke isn't crying because I'm mean. She's crying because her slow-motion takeover failed. She wanted to run this house, and now she realizes she doesn't control anything, not even the Wi-Fi password." He swallowed hard. "She says if this keeps up, we'll have to move. She can't handle it mentally." I put a hand on his shoulder, the same gesture that used to comfort him now, drawing a clear line. "That's actually a great idea, Ethan. Honestly, it's the best one she's had in months. You're young. You need your own space where you can paint the furniture whatever color you want. I'll even help you pack the boxes. I already grabbed some empty ones from the store. They're in the basement." He stared at me in disbelief. He'd expected me to fight, to cry, to beg them to stay. The fact that I saw his agreement as a relief completely broke his worldview. "But we don't have money for a deposit in Seattle. You know how expensive it is." I nodded slowly. "Maybe you should have saved the lease car money and those fancy organic subscriptions instead." "It's a tough lesson, son, but an important one. I won't cover your deposit, but I will waive this month's rent contribution if you're out by the 15th. That night, I slept deeper and more peacefully than I had in years. The house was already breathing easier. The move-out happened faster than I expected. Once Brooke realized there was nothing left to take and the sale threat was real, she switched to escape mode. She didn't want to live somewhere she was only tolerated. The packing was full of bitter little jabs. "You'll see what it's like when you're old and alone and nobody checks on you." She snapped down the hall while stuffing clothes into suitcases. I helped Ethan carry the heavy boxes just like I'd promised. I was polite as could be, even offered them tea, which they refused, of course. I didn't rise to any of their bait. Cut off the oxygen, and the fire dies on its own. Brooke tried one last dramatic moment when she wanted to take an old mirror that actually belonged with the house. "It would look perfect in our new place," she challenged. "The mirror stays Brooke. It belongs on that wall," I said simply. She left it and slammed the bedroom door so hard a picture fell off the wall. When the last rented moving van pulled away, Ethan clearly overwhelmed behind the wheel. I stood at the front door. Brooke wouldn't shake my hand. She climbed in without a word and stared straight ahead. Ethan gave me a quick, stiff, embarrassed hug. "I'm sorry it turned out this way, Mom," he whispered. "I'm not Ethan," I answered loud enough for Brooke to hear. It was a necessary clearing of the air. "Call when you're settled." I watched the van until it disappeared around the corner onto the main road. Then I turned and walked slowly back up the steps to my house. The stairwell smelled like dust and effort. But when I reached the top and locked the door behind me, that click was the sweetest sound I'd heard in months. I was alone. But for the first time since Richard died, I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. The house was empty, but it didn't feel empty. It felt cleansed, like after a big summer storm that finally clears the heavy air. I walked through every room methodically. In the kitchen, I packed up Brooke's leftover plastic containers and half-used superfood bags into a box for the thrift store. I brought my old spices back up from the basement, wiped the shelves, and put everything back where it belonged. The warm scent of rosemary, thyme, and real black pepper slowly filled the air. I sat down at the big oak table in the dining room. Sunlight slanted through the window and danced across the polished wood. No more blue labels, no more Wi-Fi blocks, No more sideways glances over breakfast. My bank account was steady, my locks were solid, and my boundaries were as clear as lines in a textbook. I hadn't won my dignity back by yelling. I'd won it by acting. Ethan called a week later. He sounded worn out. The new apartment was small and noisy, and Brooke was already unhappy with the neighbors. For the first time in months, he asked, "How are you doing, Mom?" "Really?" I leaned back in my chair and looked at Richard's bookshelves. "I'm doing great, Ethan. I spent 2 hours reading in the garden this morning, then pan-seared a nice piece of salmon. I'm enjoying the peace." He was quiet for a second. "Can we come by sometime?" "You're always welcome, Ethan," I said kindly but firmly. "But Brooke only. If she's learned that in this house, you respect the person who owns it. And please call ahead. I've started doing things again. I signed up for a pottery class, and I go for walks with Frank regularly." I hung up without waiting for an answer. I was Vivian Hastings, 67 years old, retired nurse. I knew how to heal wounds, but now I also knew how to keep them from forming in the first place. I picked up my tea, stepped onto the deck, and watched the birds. It was my house. It was my life, and damn it felt good. Don't mistake silence for surrender. Some people don't need to raise their voice, they just stop allowing the nonsense, and everything quietly slides back into its rightful place.